We are live, everyone. We are live tonight. Listen, I had a glorious day. It was productive. I had fun. I laughed a lot. And even though one client said to me, well, somebody without heat and water, that's not my problem. I was like, oh, well then. Okay, I'll remember that. Next time you don't have heat and water in your house. But you know how it is, right? Sometimes people are people, you meet them everywhere, but he is God nonetheless. And we still gotta say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Trust me, we meet all kinds, all kinds. Tonight's lecture, purified by the death of your delusions. Uh, this is from January the 28th, 1964. I think I may have read this one before, but hey, second time's a charm. You can learn something new. Tonight's subject is about one's delusions. Purified by the death of your delusions. Well, you may find it, I don't say you will find it profound, no. But I've always felt that whatever is most profoundly spiritual is in reality most directly practical. And you'll find this very practical, but it does take us into other areas. Possibly the most, if I could choose among the Beatitudes, I would choose the sixth, if I could choose. But it seems arrogant on anyone's part to choose among the great Beatitudes. The sixth Beatitude is, Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Matthew 5, verse 8. This is a profound statement because man becomes what he beholds. And no man becomes God until he can see God. It is God and God alone who unveils himself that man can see him. But it is an everlasting expansion of the unveiling, as we are told so clearly in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18. And we all with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being changed into his likeness from one degree of glory to another. For this is by the Lord who is the Spirit. So he unveils himself in our presence. And we at that moment are transformed into the image of what we behold. We invariably become what we behold. The veil that we wear is this garment. And so he simply lifts it and exposes himself, and we behold him as we become him. But we are told there's a condition opposed upon it. Ah. And you might think, well, can I meet the condition? Let me repeat it. The condition is, Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. You might wonder which is the more difficult, the condition or the promise, purity of heart or seeing God. Well, let me tell you from my own experience. God is infinitely merciful. He initiates the process by which you and I are purified. You see, you could sit from now to the end of time and you could not purify yourself. God initiates the entire plan of purification and then devises the means by which we are purified. And you see, it happens so suddenly, you'll never dream in eternity how it happens. So let me share with you a story told to me this past year in the city of San Francisco, this past fall. Well, he's one perfectly marvelous chap. He was born in Boston, Massachusetts. The only child of parents who came here from Ireland, raised in a very rugged environment where he thought if he fought daily, he was a man. He would come home with bloody nose, black eyes, and he thought that that was the way to live. He went through life that way. And then came the Second World War. And so he went off to war. He was a sergeant in this company, and he found himself in New Guinea. The Japanese had pinned them down, and the entire company was flat on their faces, dug in, and they could not move. He said, Neville, let me now make a confession. Raised in my limited environment, in an Irish environment in Boston, Massachusetts, I had two extreme hates in my life, not dislikes, hates. I hated Jews and I hated Negroes. You cannot justify a prejudice because you can't. There's no reason in God's world why one should hate anything, but he hated. And that was his confession. He said, I, as a sergeant, gave this Jew, who was a private, every dirty thing in the world to do, and I was his superior. And here, we are now pinned down in New Guinea by Japanese machine gun fire, and we couldn't move. If I barely raised my head, I would feel on my steel helmet the bullets ricocheting off my helmet. You couldn't budge. They had us completely pinned down. And this Jew to my left said to me, Sarge, do you have any hand grenades? And I said, well, yes. And I detached three from my belt, and I could get them to him without being detected. And this Jew jumped up suddenly and completely wiped out the entire nest of Japanese snipers with their machine guns. Now, he was severely wounded, but it was not mortal. And at that very moment, I overcame all of my prejudices for the Jew. All the walls of Jericho came tumbling down. All of these ancient evils in me collapsed. And then I understood that statement, which I had read, but I did not understand it before. You see, these buildings, and you're proud of them, as I was proud of my prejudices. I was an Irishman, and I was Catholic, better than any other religion in the world, better than any person in the world. And all these things that I hated. And then suddenly I remembered this statement. You see these buildings? Not one stone will be left standing upon another that will not be thrown down. Matthew 24, verse 2. And the ancient prejudice, the ancient evil crumbled within me. And I not only did not hate the Jew, I loved them. So when I came back to this country, I worked myself into a position where I had my own business in masonry, bricks, mortar, everything that went into the building of a building using masonry, I supplied in San Francisco. And the Jew got the first chance at any job available. Then came something that happened by accident, seemingly, and some explosion took place in the factory, and I am burning. My body is aflame. My overalls are burning. And all of the Caucasians in the place, they didn't even rush to save me. A Negro rushed forward, threw me on the floor, rolled me over, and put it out, burning himself in the process. And I was lit. Oh, burning. But he burned. And at that very moment, my hate turned to love. So today, in my business in San Francisco, you want a job, you either must first be a Jew or a Negro. My hate turned into love, for I could not have plotted that. I couldn't have planned it. It just happened that it happened this way. Well, I'll tell you, it happened that way because God planned it that way. You see, God became man that man may become God. There is nothing but God in this world. And so when you sit there this night and you say, I am, well, that is his name. That is his great name, the only name. So I am what? I'm prejudiced? Well, that is the wall he's going to tear down. I am prejudiced against this, that, or the other? Uh-uh. He will bring it down. As he brings it down, he unveils himself at a certain level and lifts your veil. And you behold him, and you become what you behold. So, as we are told, and we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of God, are changed into his likeness from one degree of glory to another. For this is by the Spirit of the Lord, who is the Spirit. And so, don't plot it. It is going to happen. If tonight you're prejudiced, well, may I tell you, you are not outside of salvation. God has plotted the way of salvation for you and will place you into a situation just like this chap. And his name is Bill Donovan. You can't get a more Irish name. Well, here is Bill. And today you couldn't meet a nicer person. But to show you how he was really searching for God. When he came west, he went alcoholic. With all of his prejudices, he went alcoholic, completely blind. He was searching for the spirit, and he saw the false spirit in the form of alcohol. Now, he didn't know it, and then he joined AA. And for the last dozen years, Bill hasn't touched a drop. He took me out to dinner. He knows I take a drink. He said, Neville, you have all you want. But Becky and I, his wife, we never touch a drop. We both were AA and met in AA because of our problem. I didn't tell him then that he was searching. He knew it in the depths of his soul. He was searching for God and saw God in some spurious form of alcohol. Spurious? Hold on. Getting the dictionary. Spurious. Ugh. PQRSSP. Forgive me. I have my my Merriam-Webster. Spurious. SBU. Spurious. Not genuine or false. Not genuine or false. So he was searching for God and saw God in some false form, which was alcohol. Spurious. Now that's really what it is. It is simply another form. It is spirit, the same word spirit. Spirit is alcohol. And so he was searching for it and saw it in a form that was false. And then joined it. And now today you couldn't in any way tempt him to take one little drop. He just doesn't want it. But he overcame the prejudice. And then all these things crumbled within him. So I say, if today you are prejudiced, then don't be concerned. Everyone in this world is prejudiced, and these things are built around them that God may awaken. So you are placed into an environment where you don't know it. He was brought into this little environment in Boston, surrounded with a certain prejudice, a hatred, and he grew into it. And then God placed him in a certain environment where the two he hated most were his saviors in this world. The Jew saved the entire company, and the Negro saved his personal life. And today, the two are the most employed in his very successful business. So I say it works this way. So don't be, if you have it this night, don't be concerned. God will plot it, God will plan it. The initiative for man's salvation is with God. And may I tell you, it isn't prompted by any good deed. Oh, your salvation isn't plotted by any good deed that man has done. Man's salvation is by grace and grace alone. No one can earn it. No one in this world is good enough to earn salvation. Salvation is becoming God. God became man that man may become God. And it is a series of unveiling, 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 where suddenly man awakens to find himself transformed. This finite, fallible being transformed overnight into an entirely different being. And yet, the veil has not been completely lifted. Another veil, and still another veil. For truth is an ever increasing illumination, but it is all man. So here, man is purified by the death of his delusions. But listen to this carefully. For this is from the greatest in my mind, the greatest mystic that ever walked the face of this earth, William Blake. He claimed that the entire poem, Jerusalem, was dictated by God. So he claimed. I wouldn't question Blake's right to make that claim. He makes it not only in the poem itself, but in his letters to his friends, and they're all on record. Well, here is his statement. He claims it was dictated. Then those in eternity who contemplate on death said thus. Who are they in this great eternity who contemplate on death? And what is death on which they contemplate? Oh, may I tell you, the beings contemplating are those who said, let us make man in our image, the Elohim, the gods. Let us make man in our image by the same process of unveiling ourselves. And because man becomes what he beholds, they'll become us as I unveil them, as they become pure in heart. And those in great eternity said thus. And what did they say? They are contemplating on death. You might think of death when you see someone go into the grave. That is not death. This is the grave. Oh, this is the grave? He'll tell you what it is. Everyone seated here seems so animate, so alive. Well, these are the sepulchres of God. God is buried in every child born of woman, and that is the grave that these in great eternity contemplate. And those in great eternity who contemplate on death said thus. Now listen to it carefully. What did they say? What seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be, and is productive of the most dreadful consequences to those to whom it seems to be, even of torments and despair and eternal death. But divine mercy steps beyond and redeems man in the body of Jesus. That is from William Blake, Jerusalem, plate number 36. He says, what seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be. Do you understand that? So what you think it is what it is. Because what seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be, and is productive of the most dreadful consequences to those to whom it seems to be, even of torments and despair and eternal death. But divine mercy steps beyond and redeems man in the body of Jesus. And then the whole vision returns to its perfection. Length, breadth, and height take on the original divine vision. Now let us come back to the statement that he is now saying. What did he say? What seems to be. Now, to Bill Donovan, it seemed that a Jew was a coward, and he proved himself the bravest of them all in New Guinea. To Bill Donovan, what seemed to be is to those to whom it seemed to be. The Negro was below him in courage and in intelligence and in everything, and he was his savior. When no white man came to save him, the Negro walked forward, threw him on the floor, and rolled him over, burning himself in the process, and saved him. And he overcame at that very moment all hatred. So go back. What seems to be is. So what it seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be, and is productive of the most dreadful consequences to those to whom it seems to be, even of torment. Well, wasn't that torment? A man living with a prejudice, isn't he really living in hell? And doesn't he despair? He can't get out of it. And it is eternal death. And they are contemplating on this eternal death. But, and this is our great comfort, the divine mercy steps beyond and redeems man in the body of Jesus. He plots a play by which man overcomes his prejudice, where the walls of Jericho fall and the ancient evils crumble. And suddenly, he can unveil you. And that moment he unveils you, you see him who unveils you, and you become what you behold, one step higher. And then another play, and still another play. And we go on forever and forever becoming God. For God actually limited himself to man. He became man that man may become God. So all of us in this world are one. There is only one. There's only one God. There aren't two gods. Well, as we're told in Zechariah, and the Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day, his name will be one, and the Lord will be one, only one. And he set up the only way in this world that he could reveal the oneness of us all. There is only one way that he could ever reveal that you and I are one. I answer to the name of Neville. You say, Neville, and I say, yes. Then all of a sudden I say, Charlie, and someone present, Charlie, and you'll say, well, yes, I'm here. And we seem so different, so distinct. Well, we are. We're unique in the eyes of God as separate visions of God. And yet I tell you, we are one. We are actually one because we're all being unveiled as God. God only has one son, only one son, and that one son's name is David. At the moment of the unveiling, he unveils David, and then you see the relationship between yourself and David. And you look right into the eyes of David, and he calls you father, and you know there's no doubt in your mind of this relationship. We are father son. You go back into the ancient scripture and you read that, thou art my son, today I have begotten thee. Psalm 2, verse 7. It is to David these words are spoken. And you know in the depths of your soul, every being in this world will one day be unveiled in the presence of David. And David will call him father. If David calls you father, and he's already called me father, are we not one? There is no way in the world that God could ever reveal the unity of humanity save through a son. And so, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Eh? Not to walk with me as a friend, but to reveal to me, to myself. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Not to walk with me as a friend, but to reveal me to myself. John 3, verse 16. God is unveiling himself in us. For let us make man in our image. Well, if I am the image of him, and I am he, then I am the father of his son. He cannot make me less if he fulfills his purpose. And it is God's purpose to give himself to man, and so completely give himself to man that there is no one in the world, simply God and that man. And finally, only that man. God completed the gift, and he is God. So God becomes man that man may become God, and it is the unveiling process. And the only way in the world he can reveal the gift is through his son. And so we're told no one knows who the son is except the father, and no one knows who the father is except the son, and anyone to whom the son chooses to reveal him. Matthew 11:27. So when the son chooses to reveal himself, the relationship is son father. It will happen to every being in this world. So until it happens, we have our prejudices, we have our superstitions, we have our grand buildings, and we're so proud of the buildings. But you see, God sees the heart. So blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. We think of man because of his greatness in the world. Well, he may be a very good soldier, a very good banker, a very good scientist, a very good, and you name anything in this world, artist even. And he need not be a good man. Well, God isn't seeing the status symbol on the outside with the medals on you because you are a good scientist. And maybe you'll win the prize this year and get $50,000 from some great foundation. And the world will hail you because you did it in the eyes of the world. And you appear as a very good and great scientist. But God sees not the outward appearances, God sees only the heart. As we're told in the 16th chapter of the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel 16, verse 7, he says, "And they brought before the prophet the first son of Jesse. And he said to himself, well, surely this is the Lord's anointed. Look at his height. Look at the beauty, the greatness of this man. His name is Eliab." Eli means my God, and Ab is father. So my God is father. And surely he is the Lord's anointed. And the Lord said to the prophet, I, I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man sees the outward appearance, and God sees the heart. Well, then he brings another. I have rejected him. He brings a third. Ugh, I have rejected him. And he marches 7 before him. I rejected them. And then comes David, and he said, oh, rise and anoint him. So David was the anointed. And then we come into the unfolding of the story. When Paul tells the story of David, and he said, he put these words into the mouth of God. Here is a man after my own heart. Acts 13, verse 22. So here he sees a man after his own heart. And so you behold David. Well, you are he. David is his son, yet you are his father. For listen to these words. The Son of Man, who is called the Son of Man. I'll say it again. The Son of Man, who's called the Son of God. But the Son of God is also God the Son. Remember that. The Son of God is also God the Son. For I and my Father are one. So he sets up a son called David, and he's your son. Therefore, you are his father, and the father of David is God. But you are the one that he brought out of humanity called David. David symbolizes the whole vast world of humanity, and he draws you out, pardon me, and reveals himself. Glory after glory after glory. It is himself being revealed. So as you are brought out, you are the Son of God. Now, listen to the words. I will raise up after you your son, who shall come forth from your body. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. 2 Samuel 7, verse 12. So you are brought forth as the Son of God. For the Son of God is also God the Son. One. I and my Father are one. Though my Father is greater than I. John 10, verse 29 and 30. For the thing symbolized in this world is greater than the symbol. So I come symbolizing him who unveiled himself before me, and then I become him. Then he sent me back into the world once more, encompassed in my prejudice, and then he will tear it down and unveil himself with a still greater glory and send me back again. For there's no limit to the expansion of God unveiling himself in me. There's no limit. So truth is an ever increasing illumination forever and forever. And every being in this world is one. You see, there's nothing but God. God and God alone became us that we may become God. And he had set up the means by which he unfolds it in this world. Pardon me. So I know we are purified that we may see God through the depth of our delusions. When someone has numberless delusions, well, what is a delusion? Well, the dictionary defines it as a mental error, a false belief, especially that belief that is persisted in, that when one goes through, it becomes, well, that's fixation. Well, don't despair. Love them dearly because God has plotted the means by which he's going to tear that building down. And that building will crumble. Whether it be someone who thinks himself because he has $1 billion, he's better than someone else. And there are those who have it. God will tear it down. Don't despair when it crumbles. Someone who could not give them one penny to add to their fortune will be their savior. And then he sees that not the rich came to support, but the poor one. Well, he'll see. He may be prejudiced this day against rich people. That's a prejudice too. Well, that comes down. You can be very, very poor, and you may have a frightful prejudice against those who have things, and those who have things have no reason to save you, but they will save you. That's how God plots it. That's how he plans it. Using the foolish to confound the wise, I see. Hmm. I speak from experience. When my father had the blow of blows in Barbados, and no one came to see him because he was accused wrongfully, but accused. Those who were playing it safe, no one came home even to say, well, how are you feeling, Joel? Well, Joel sat alone. And a man came, a very wealthy man, a very prominent person socially, financially, intellectually. He came to Barbados for his health years ago and made a fortune, but he came out as a perfectly trained gentleman from England. He was cultured. He was a great athlete. He was a blue at Cambridge. He had all that it took. He was the only one that came home to see my father. And he said to Daddy, well, Joe, what can I do? Well, he said, I have all these children to feed and the servants to feed, and I have no money. Well, he said, what do you want to do? And he said, all I know is simply what I've done before, a grocery business. That is just what I did before. I did a good business and I was falsely accused. They took everything from me by the false accusations. And if I had money, I'd go back into the business and run it as I did before successfully. He went back to his office and he said to the people, Mr. Goddard will open up in the next month or so a business, and I want you to extend credit to the limit. Whatever he orders, you fill the order and no bill must be sent to him. When he has it, he'll pay. And so we opened up a little business, and he stocked us to the tune of about 40 to $50,000 in merchandise. And we had no money. And when we sold it, we paid him. And when he died and his son took over, if his firm had a match to sell and it was a cent more per box than any competitor, don't come near the Goddards. He and he alone sold us the match. And so when, say, 5, 6 years ago, I know this much, they were doing with us in excess of $500,000 a year in business. That was their initial investment. And so if my father had any prejudice of the wealthy people of the world, for he had nothing as a boy, that building collapsed and crumbled. That ancient prejudice because one very wealthy, cultured gentleman came into his life and made it possible to once more start in a marvelous way. So your prejudice need not be against a certain race or religion. It could be against wealth. Those who have none could be prejudiced against the wealthy, and the wealthy may be prejudiced against something else. And it goes all over the world. These are the buildings spoken of in Mark chapter 13. You see these great buildings? I tell you, not one stone will be left standing on the other, but all will be thrown down. Mark 13, verse 2. So if today you have it, I know God has plotted and planned your redemption, and no one will be unredeemed. And so he will plot it and plan the scene by which the prejudice collapses in your presence, and you will fall in love with that formerly which you hated. And so you actually fall in love with it. And then eventually the whole veil is lifted, and God's only begotten Son calls you Father. And you know as he does it, you are not alone. He's going to call every being in this world Father. Therefore, really, you are one with every being in the world. And then you understand the poet. All things by a law divine in one another's being mingle. Oh, slowly say that to me again, Angela. All things by a law divine in one another's being mingle. All things by a law divine. So every being in this world is actually interwoven. And so when Donne wrote the words, I am involved in mankind. Every man's death is the death of me. Never send to ask for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for me. You read that something happened today across the water and someone was killed violently. Don't ask for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for me. Well, I am involved in mankind, and every man's death is the death of me. For there's nothing but God buried in these graves in the world. So those in great eternity who contemplate on death said thus, and listen to it because it works in the most practical way on this level. What seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be, and is productive of the most dreadful consequences to those to whom it seems to be, even of torments and despair and eternal death. Now let us stop it there now. If it does this with torments and despair and eternal death, well, it will do it with joy and everything else in this world. So, what seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be. Oh, we have to say it again, Angela. What seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be. Oh, I wonder what the feeling would be like were I the man that I want to be. So, what seems to be is. Listen to it. What seems to be is. To who? To you. So it is. So he says, I wonder what the feeling would be like were I the man that I want to be. Suppose now that I had, and I name it, X number of dollars a year, and I name it, and things, all things being relative. Suppose now I took just an outside figure. What if I had $35,000 a year? Well, living modestly as I do, wouldn't that be wonderful? $35,000 a year? Well, then, what seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be, and is productive of that which it seems to be. I'm going to read it a little slower, just a little bit slower. Why slower? Because it can take root. What seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be. And it is productive of that which it seems to be. So if I dare to assume that I am it and walk this earth just as though it were true, if I could live just as though it were true, well, then I would prove that statement. What statement? What seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be. Now, William Blake claimed that these words were dictated to him by the Spirit of love, who is God. Now, William Blake made that bold statement, and I trust him implicitly. What seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be. But I could persuade myself that I am what at this moment reason denies. I am taking this word delusion in a different manner because delusion is to entertain a false belief. Well, could this now prove true? Well, then a man may have a false belief that the Jew is not his equal. And until this thing happened, he acted so that he proved it to his own satisfaction. And when he did it to the Negro. Well, did he not prove it to his own satisfaction? Well, now we take the same principle. What seems to be is. In other words, what you believe to be true is true. not just for the good, the bad, or the indifferent, all of them. So that's why he says if you can believe in the torment and the horror, well, then it is. But he says it also works for the joy, does it not? So, what seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be. And take it in a different light and prove it, although the whole thing will fade in the end. For in the end, all will fade, and only God remains. You will remain, but everything else will go. All your buildings will collapse, whether they be made of gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or stubble. All will collapse, but you will remain the builder. So I can now build using the same principle. What seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be. Well, can I not assume that things are as I would like them to be for myself, for you, for anyone else in the world? And as I do it, a friend of mine this night, you see, before I came on the platform, he said he's working on himself towards actually feeling the good of another. Well, after all, he's working with others. It is up to him as a good man in his company to congratulate a salesman who brings in a big deal. But he said, you know, in the past, I must confess, there was a certain envy on my part when I heard of a great sale on the part of another. I wanted to congratulate her or congratulate him, but I couldn't deny in my heart I wish I had done it. But when I could really let go and sincerely mean it and say, I'm doing it all in my mind's eye, I didn't do it physically. I did it in my mind's eye and really felt it. You see, this past week, a lady comes in having closed a $50,000 contract. And now he said, now I know that's a tremendous amount of money for her. And I said to her, thrilled. Now, I'm not envious. I am thrilled that she could close that deal. In the past, there was a reservation because I wish I had done it. And so my congratulations were not completely from the heart to the point where I was really pure in heart. But now he knows. Now he knows. So pure in heart doesn't mean you don't do evil, eh? Pure in heart means his congratulations were sincere. So pure in heart means sincerity. I digress. You see, you can congratulate every being in this world for every good thing they do because it is yourself. Oh, there's only one in this world, only one God, and one God became the seeming many. The stone became fragmented into unnumbered parts with different pigments. You see, some wear white pigments, some red pigments, black pigments, brown pigments, but only one in this world, all fragmented. And in the end, the Lord will be one and his name one. And may I tell you, that name, although the grand name is I am, which is called Jesus or Jesse, there is another name given to it, a glorious name. And that name is Jesus Christ. Oh, people don't believe it, but that name is Jesus Christ. It is I am. Granted, but if you read the story carefully, he reveals the grand I am. What does he say? I am the door. I am the true vine. I am the way. I am the life. I am the truth. I am the resurrection. It is the same grand I amness, but the name is a glorious name, and the name is Jesus Christ. Don't make a fetish of it, for he became you. He is unveiling himself in you, and when he completely unveils himself, you are Jesus Christ. And that is the thing. Now, let us believe that what seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be. And may I suggest that this night you take the most glorious concept of yourself. I don't care what it is. Make it bigger than you now even hope to realize because, well, all things are possible to God. Whatever is your present ambition, Make it a noble ambition, but make it bigger. And then try to persuade yourself as we go into the silence that it is true. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then view the world from that assumption that you can see reflected on the faces of these imaginary friends, that expression which implies that they see in you the man that you are assuming that you are. Now I will read the questions, but then I'll come back to that passage so it can lead us into the silence. The first question is inaudible, but Neville responds. To repeat the quote, it is the Gospel of Thomas from the Apocrypha where man believes, or women are taught to believe, that they are secondary. Women are not secondary because man is not a male and man is not a female. Man wears the garment of male and female, but man is the image of God. Let me read that again. He says, the Gospel of Thomas from the Apocrypha, where man believes, or women are taught to believe, that they are secondary. Women are not secondary because man is not a male and man is not a female. Man wears the garment of male and female, but man is the image of God. And so no one knows man. Man is the wearer of these garments, male and female. So, as we are told in Timothy, woman will be saved by the bearing of a child. Not bearing children as priesthoods the world over have tried to convey to womanhood. That's bearing children. Everyone in this world will one day go through a certain mystical experience who is now wearing the garment of female, where they will actually find and feel themselves male, and then they will also know that they are man wearing that garment. Well, I speak from experience. Man in the resurrection is above the organization of sex in the resurrection. You see, we are told that question was put to him in the most marvelous manner. Master Moses in the law said that if a man marries and dies, leaving no issue, and has brothers, the brother should marry his wife to raise up issue for the brother who died. Well, there were 7 brothers, and the first one married and died, leaving no offspring. The second took her, and he died, leaving no offspring. And the third, the fourth, and finally, 7 of them married her, and they left no offspring. Well, whose wife is she in the resurrection? And he said, well, you do not know the scripture. For the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are accounted worthy to attain to that age, to the resurrection from the dead, they neither marry nor are they given in marriage. For they are sons of God and sons of the resurrection. Luke 20, verse 28 through 36. We are being prepared here to enter a new age altogether, where we don't need the relationship of male female. It is a brotherhood where we create out of our own wonderful human imagination. Because everything is subject to our imaginative power. We don't need the divided image of male female. We are man, and man is not a male, and man is not a female, because man is God. You are looking at his face. Yes, to me, when I looked into the face as it was unveiled before me, it is man, granted, but above the organization of sex. So that book is not included in our canon, but it is a glorious book. And I'll say to every lady I know that my mother, my wife, my daughter, and all the ladies that I know in this world will one day confront David as David's father, not David's mother. He has no mother. And so the most scholarly of all biblical criticism is the Encyclopedia Biblica. And that gives no mother to David. The manuscripts, the oldest known manuscripts, mention no genealogy outside of a father whose name is Jesse. And the word Jesse is another form of the verb to be. I am. That is what it means. So, whose son are you? I am the son of your servant Jesse. 1 Samuel 17, verse 58. In other words, I am the son of I am. He comes out of me. And so he looks at me. Well, I am his father. Therefore, he is the son of the being that I am, whoever I am. So when they said, "Well, what shall I say?" Well, just say, I am who I am. Exodus 3, verse 14. He didn't say what it is. I am what I am. I am that I am. I am what I will be. So he turns to me and calls me Father. And so he is the son of the being that I am, whatever that being is. So that is the name. No mother, just the Father. So every being in this world, male or female, will one day have the experience, the thrill of thrills, to be called Father by God's only begotten Son. Psalms 2, verse 7. And then he will know that he is God. But there's no other way to know he's God unless the Son reveals it. For no one will know the Father unless the Son reveals him. So he tells us in John 14, no one comes unto the Father save by me. No one comes unto the Father save by me. This next question says, Neville, your idea then is purification consists in ridding oneself of delusions? Oh, well, yes. Yes, sir, definitely. And yet, as I said, if it is a very difficult thing, don't despair. God has plotted and planned the way that that building, that ancient prejudice will crumble. He will put you into the position where the one that represents that prejudice will be your savior. As if it was in my friend's case, as it was in my friend's case, Bill Donovan. And Bill, today, you couldn't meet a nicer person. You could hardly believe that he was that violent creature who fought all over Boston and thought it marvelous to be always fighting, coming home with black eyes and all other kinds of things. Well, he thought that's the way that one should live. To prove yourself a man, you must fight all day. So go into the street and fight. If he found a Negro, he would fight. If he found a Jew, he would fight and come home to his mother with a black eye. But she was just as prejudiced as he because they were the best. And first of all, they were Irish and they were Catholic. Well, you can't get any better in the environment of the Irish Catholic. Well, that's part of the setup. So he had to prove himself that that's not really God's only begotten child, that everyone is. And so this thing happened to him. But he was big enough to tell me. For one night in San Francisco last spring, I was talking on how man overcomes these strange delusions. And I was using stories. And then he said to me after the meeting, Neville, are you free for dinner tomorrow? I said, I dine very early because I take the platform at 7:30. And well, he said, I'll eat as early as you. You want to make it 5? And I said, yes. So he and Betty and I went off to a very lovely French restaurant. And then he told me this story. And he told me this perfectly marvelous story. You see, when you meet Bill, you couldn't meet a sweeter, kinder person. His story is the one I told here the other day. He went off to Mexico. The boat went off to sea, and he reenacted the scene as though it were now anchored safely on the beach. And then he plunged in bravely into the ocean. And here he's going to drown when suddenly a wave lifted him up, and he sees a boat that should not be in the area with 3 men aboard. He screams on the crest of the wave, and they came, and that's Bill. So you see, everyone is not only redeemable, everyone will be redeemed. And they got him, and they took him out to sea and brought him back, and they brought back the little boat that was drifting away. So this moral purity is not sexual. having to do with moral perfection, because the word pure is Semitic speech, or in Semitic speech includes mind and emotion and has no reference whatsoever to sexual morality or any moral perfection. Absolutely none. It is a prejudice that God is seeing, because who's going to lay down the foundation of what is right sexually? What person in this world would dare to set himself up as the criterion on which or of what is the right thing from a sexual point of view? You see, to those who become celibate, either because nature made him that way or they thought they could obtain the kingdom of heaven by becoming emasculated, then there are others who go through other forms of it. But it hasn't anything to do with any moral or sexual perfection, because who is going to set up the standard? It isn't that at all. It's this strange, peculiar delusion that is a prejudice, a fixed false idea that will crumble. And God will see that it will crumble. As it crumbles, he unveils himself. As he unveils himself, you become the one that you behold, so that one more glory you are. So read it carefully in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, that wonderful unveiling of God from one glory to another. And this is done by the Spirit. So no one can brag, no one can boast, because it is God and God alone who plots and plans the whole thing. In the end, we are all one. And what a play! What a glorious play! And that is why the cry at the very end, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Luke 23, verse 32. They don't know because we are completely veiled. But you take tonight's story, what seems to be is, believe me, to those to whom it seems to be. Whether we are prejudiced or you dream of good fortune, you dream of lovely fortune, well, what seems to be is, believe it. I am from a background where I'm a son of one who didn't have two pennies to rub together, and 10 children to feed, and a wife and himself, and a mother in law and servants in the house, and not two pennies. What seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be. So when he died 5 years ago, he could leave quite a fortune to his children, so that the speaker, if he so desired, need not work, if he so desired. But I'd rather drop dead this night than not do what I'm doing. The day that I'm not doing what I'm doing, don't let me just live on what he gave me. Let me make my exit tonight. That's perfectly all right. I know exactly where I'm going, but to remain here just because I could afford to eat and vegetate, I don't want that. I want to be here as long as I can do it. But the day I cannot do it, just let me not vegetate. Let me make my exit from this world. But he left me all that it takes to live graciously in this world of Caesar without raising a finger. Now, before we go into the silence, before we go into the silence, I will read you this paragraph because it is the precursor to going into the silence. He says, now let us go into the silence, and let us believe that what seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be. And may I suggest that this night you take the most glorious concept of yourself. I don't care what it is. Make it bigger than you now even hoped to realize, because all things are possible to God. Whatever is your present ambition, make it a noble ambition, but make it bigger, and then try to persuade yourself as we go into the silence that it is true. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then view the world from that assumption that you can see reflected on the faces of these imaginary friends. Well, that expression, which implies that they see in you the man that you are assuming that you are. Hmm. Let us go into the silence for 5 minutes. Doing what? Holding the most glorious concept of yourself. Make it bigger than you now even hoped to realize. Because all things are possible to God. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. What does that mean? What would it be like if I were the man or the woman I wanted to be? What would that feel like to me? That is the assuming of the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And then you view the world from that assumption that you can see reflected on the faces of these imaginary friends. That expression which implies that they see in you the man that you are assuming that you are. Now, let us go into the silence. And there concludes our 5 minutes of being in the silence. But remember what you're actually contemplating, or as the world calls it, meditating on. You're contemplating on a noble ideal of yourself. What is it that I say I want to be? And you see it in your mind's eye. And man becomes what he contemplates, what he beholds. Because what seems to be is. Why is that? Do you know what that principle is? The principle of correspondence. As within, so without. As above, so below. So as a special treat before we go to bed, I'll just dangle it a little bit. Ooh, got the right one downstairs. This is my nighttime chime. Countdown initiated. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Much love. A little bit and I say, rest well, everybody. Good night.